The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
So occasionally, Michelle, we have listeners reach out to us, which is really, really exciting because that's exactly what we want from our listeners, to reach out to us and have correspondence. So we got a couple of really great questions from two listeners that we're going to share today and try to answer and provide our insight.
Yeah, you said it, Kelly. We love getting listener questions. And sometimes, we have a guest where we can talk about these topics and sometimes we don't. And so we felt these two questions really warranted some of our time to explore and think about together.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kelly and Michelle, and I'm one of your hosts, Kelly. With me is my co-host, Michelle, a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been providing individual and couples therapy for over 2 decades. Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships, why we do what we do, and what causes people to unrelate.
Question number 1. Hi, Kelly and Michelle. My partner does annoying things that really get to me, and it doesn't seem to change. I don't know if I can take it anymore. How do I get him to stop?
Wouldn't that be great if you could go to couples therapy and the therapist could just be like, cut it out, and then you'd be done?
So we know it's a him. He's the culprit here.
He's the culprit. He's to blame 100%. No.
Well, I got to imagine in your practice, Michelle, you get this question quite a bit.
A lot of times when a couple is, having challenges or in distress, a lot of it is stemming from each person or at least one of the people feeling like they're just generally annoyed or irritated or upset with their partner because they're doing something or not doing something that the person needs. And so this topic is huge.
Like, what exactly is their partner doing that they find annoying? And maybe it doesn't matter, but I'm curious as a man, okay, what is she finding annoying? Like snoring? I don't know.
Well, okay, so that's kind of the point of exploring this question, because to a certain extent, we don't need to know the specific behavior or issue, but she needs to figure it out. And I'm saying she, but it could be a he, actually, two partners. So the person who wrote in needs to figure out, is this issue a deal breaker or not? Because you might be getting annoyed by something over and over and over again. Everyone in the world has those things that they fight over or keep coming up against. And people that have healthy and happy relationships are no exception to that. When I say everyone, I mean everyone. So the key is for everyone to figure out, is this recurring issue that keeps annoying our listener one that she can find a way to live with or improve upon in some way? Or is it an issue that is going to make it really hard for the relationship to be successful and ultimately mean that they shouldn't be together?
Who isn't in a relationship with a partner who does something annoying? I think that's probably a universal theme among people. I mean, everybody has something about themselves that they maybe they do that annoys others, right? I'm sure I do something. I know I do stuff that annoys my partner.
I was going to say, you absolutely do, and I do. Everyone does. You're two humans living together, and any type of relationship, romantic or family related, it's like you're going to annoy the other person. That is a part of marriage. That's a part of relationships. And so I think the key is to figure out, what I call, either is it an irritant or is it a deal breaker? And we can talk a little bit more about what those mean.
If it is a behavior, is that an irritant? It's something this person's doing that's behaviorally bothering you, whether it be they talk too much, maybe they don't talk enough, or maybe they interrupt you.
Yeah, it could be one of a million things. And it could be a behavior, but it could be also like, the person not meeting the other person's need. And that can be irritating depending on what that need is, or that could be a deal breaker. So maybe the person is like, I need, affection. I need you to show me, give me hugs and kisses. And the other person won't do that. That person has to figure out, like, am I just annoyed that I'm not getting that need met by my partner? Or is that something like I absolutely need in my life? So this is not going to work out with this partner.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go into the 2 points you were going to, irritant. What was the other one?
Deal breaker.
Deal breaker. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the easiest ways to figure out how big of an issue something is how long the annoyance actually lasts. and I guess doesn't have cascading consequences in your relationship.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to think of an example in my own life that I can share.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is one a lot of people out there can relate to, I think. My husband trims his hair and it ends up all over the sink, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So every time I see that, I get irritated,
Mhm.
like a burst of irritation, because I don't like it. I want it to be cleaned up.
Are you talking about beard hair or hair?
Yeah, beard hair. But the reason I know it's not a deal breaker for me is because after that burst of irritation, like a minute later, I've forgotten about it or I've moved on. Like I don't think about it later in the day. I don't build resentment over that particular quirk. I don't
Mhm.
lash out at him or get passive aggressive with him later in the day because of it. So I would say, even though 100% of the time that I see it, I get annoyed, it's just more of a little hiccup in my life and not a reason to break up.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess conversely, if there was something he did that bothered me to the extent that I'm like really carrying it forward, where I'm thinking about it, on off moments where it didn't even happen, where it's affecting the way I'm treating him because I'm so upset about it. And it's like this resentment that's just roiling under the surface because of this one behavior. I have to consider whether that's a deal breaker for me or not, because now it's affecting other parts of our life, not just the moment that it happens.
So that wouldn't be considered a deal breaker. It's just an irritant. Your poor husband. We're picking on him.
Yeah, sorry. I had to think of some example, and I feel like that's an innocuous one. That's not saying something about his character or anything. It's just kind of like a silly behavior. So I feel like that's
Right.
that's not
Well,
off limits, is it? I can share a silly behavior of mine if that helps.
no, but I think, well, okay. I mean, I bet you a lot of people are irritated by cleanliness habits. For example, my
Yeah.
wife complains about she calls me Hurricane Beck because her when I make dinner, I leave a mess, but I
Uh-huh.
clean it up. I'm a hurricane when I cook, and I think it's slightly irritating to her. So it is an irritant. Is it a deal breaker? Absolutely not. I think she gets annoyed.
Right. So I think a certain kind of radical acceptance that your partner is going to do things that annoy you. That's
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
accepting that fact. And then, deciding when these irritants come up, just the idea that there are going to be things that irritate you, and just looking out, being aware, as we're always talking about, looking out for whether or not it's a hiccup, like I said, or if it's annoying you to the point where it's affecting the relationship. That's when you want to kind of intervene in a more intentional way.
This person wrote, so how do I get them to stop? How do we help to get their partner to stop or at least be considerate of their irritating behavior?
To me, certainly it could be hopefully an effective conversation if this person were to bring it up. But I'm gonna challenge this person to maybe take getting it to stop off the table,
Mm.
because that's trying to make something happen in the other person. And a lot of times that's not going to work. So,
Hmm.
yes, you can share how it's making you feel. You can you gently and respectfully ask the person to stop doing it. You could put some strategies in place to support the person in not doing it anymore. So, there are things you can do. But when you lead with, changing the other person, that gets
Hmm.
tricky, because that's putting a lot of the burden on the other person, either having the capacity or the willingness to change. And sometimes that's there and sometimes that's not. So, my suggestion for our listener would be to turn inward a little bit more. And rather than thinking about it as how do I get him to stop, more so like how do I figure out for myself how important this is? And then based on that, what steps do I take for myself to either feel better about this or decide that I have to take more intense steps for the relationship?
It's also reaching some sort of compromise, isn't it? Like ultimately, this is who this person is, and yes, I'd like them to address some of these issues, but at the same time, maybe I also need to accept them for who they are.
Yeah. And again, it's in order to be able to do that, you have to decide if this thing is something that you're going to keep butting up against the rest of your life, and
Hmm.
where you're saying like I cannot handle being in a relationship with a person who does X.
Hmm.
Well, then don't be in a relationship with a person who does X. But if you decide, okay, X is survivable, X is something that I can actually deal with because I want to be with this person, then you have to keep reminding yourself of that.
Mhm.
It reminds me, like, do you know how some people are like, they say love is a verb or something like that? I don't know what the saying is, where like it's an active thing you have to do every day. You make the choice
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
1,000 times, not just one time to love someone.
Mhm. Mhm.
I kind of feel like that applies to what we're talking about, this irritant versus deal breaker thing. Because if you decide intentionally that something is an irritant and not a deal breaker, or even a deal breaker you can live with, so we can talk about the difference between those two things. You kind of have to make that choice every day. So every time you get irritated with that behavior, it's a good time to remind yourself, you know what? I decided that this is an irritant. I decided that this is not worth ending my relationship. So I'm just going to cope with my irritation rather than lash out or make it a bigger deal. Does that make sense? So it's like 1,000 commitments to making sure that you're dealing with your irritation versus, making it a poison in your relationship.
And I'm guessing if you're listening to this, you're trying to see how this fits in your life. So I'm just trying to think of how would I deal with this if there was a situation where I was really irritated by something.
Yeah, and I can tell you ways that I do it, or suggestions that I've made for people. One important one is, which we talk about a lot, is let yourself have the feeling you're feeling, because avoiding it, ignoring it, pushing it down, that's certainly not going to help the matter. So when you're feeling irritated in the moment, acknowledge that, validate it for yourself. Because if you're looking for someone else to validate your irritation, a lot of times the other person isn't irritated.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to be the ones to validate for you. If you're not letting yourself feel the feeling, that's how resentment happens. And as we know, resentment is like the killer of relationships. And then for me, sometimes I use scaling. I love scaling because to me, it like puts something in perspective. And perspective is such an important part of coping in a relationship. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how big a deal is this thing? And a lot of times, like, you can assign different points to the scale. So a 10 would be like, my partner is trying to murder me or something like really insane. So to actually say it's a 10 would be like saying, okay, that's clearly a deal breaker for most people.
That's like a 15 out of a 10 scale.
Right. Yeah. So you want 10 to be like insane, basically. And so in the moment when you're irritated, you're really asking yourself, like, how big a deal is this on a scale of 1 to 10? And then you can even decide anything 5 and below, I'm going to let go of because it's not worth it. Anything, 6 to 8, I'm going to kind of employ some coping skills or deal with it myself or talk to my partner about how I'm feeling. Great. If you're consistently rating something as like a 9 or 10 every time it happens, okay, then you got to start thinking this is a deal breaker.
Good points. I love it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I like to do is sometimes I use humor a lot to not only in therapy, but for myself to kind of, again, gain perspective. So I really don't want to put my husband on blast like this, but I'm trying to think of another example. He's one of these like genius people, but is in the absent-minded professor kind of way. Sometimes he'll just leave refrigerated things out on the counter for, the whole day. So I'll come over and I'll just go put it in the refrigerator. Fine. But, sometimes you want to give your feeling its proper attention, but you also want to not make it a big deal if it's not. So like I will like raise my fists in the air and I'll be like, curse you, shaver, and just kind of give it its due dramatic moment. And then just the silliness of that takes me out of the feeling of irritation.
Yeah.
Yeah. People think, oh, I would never do that or that's awkward or whatever. But I really suggest you try it because when you just have a silly moment, a dance party, a dramatic or a melodramatic moment to your life, it makes you chuckle and then, it definitely re-regulates you so that you're not as irritated.
Well, yeah, if you can find the funny in the moment and maybe make it a little bit more lighthearted,
right?
I think it takes the temperature down too, I would imagine, and a little bit of the anxiety, right?
Yeah.
And then ultimately it creates more of a bonding experience. Yes, you're irritated. You're letting them know you're irritated, but yet at the same time, you're also putting things in perspective, and you're saying, "Okay, this is irritating," but at the same time, I love you, and I'm going to make fun of it versus berate you, right?
Exactly. Oh, you bring up such a good point, Kelly. Because what some people do is they then start creating a narrative that it's something about who the person is, like a personality trait versus a behavior.
Mm.
And then you're talking about the core of a person. So I could say, hey, he didn't put the milk away. It just proves that he's a selfish person or he doesn't care about me because I've asked him not to do that. Or you get into that, downward spiral loop where you're like, well, if he did care about me, he wouldn't do the thing I'm asking him not to do. Or, well, if he's not willing to do that thing for me, then he must not love me as much as I love him. You can see how like this is a downward spiral. But
Totally.
all of this is like more about the core of a person. And when we confuse a behavior with like a personality, that is really rough for the person to recover from. Because then you're saying that's who you are, not that's something you did.
Side note, are you sure it's not your kids doing it?
I mean, this was a present behavior before we had kids.
Oh, got
it. I'm starting to feel bad that it's not complaints about him. I think the reason I'm offering up these examples is because they are so innocuous and because they are so like low stakes. Yeah. And that actually reminds me, another thing I do is I remember that there were probably 10 things I did that annoyed him yesterday that he didn't make a big fuss about and that he accepted graciously about me. So there is a certain social contract when you're in a relationship with someone where you say, I treat them like they treat you. And so if he is being gracious about my flaws and my quirks, the least I can do is be the same for him.
That reminds me of something happened recently where we had some forks that started going missing, and
the cats. It's the cats.
Well, worse. So my wife was like, "Where are these forks going?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And then suddenly one day, I was caught red-handed where I think we had Chipotle or something, and I threw away the Chipotle salad bowl with the forks in it.
Oh no.
And then it occurred to her, and both of us, that I'm the culprit. I'm the one who's just like randomly throwing away the containers, and I've been leaving the forks in there, and I didn't realize it. I'm so absent-minded about it, and I think she was getting irritated by the fact these forks were disappearing. So, but now it's like an inside joke. We make fun of it, the fact that Kelly must have thrown it away, which may or may not be the case. And I'm trying to be a little more aware of my behavior, like, oh crap, I'm actually doing this. Why am I doing this? I'm just being absent-minded, I think. I don't think it's dementia yet. But I think she was irritated by the fact that these forks were going missing. Me, not so much, but she was.
Yes, I have a child who accidentally throws away a lot of utensils and plates and stuff. So I feel you. But you guys, you did something kind of important, which you would hope your partner would do, which is once you find out you're the culprit, you're being more cognizant of it and trying not to do it.
Well, yeah.
Well, you say, well, yeah, like it's a given. But part of why relationships are in distress is because the partner doesn't want to make an adjustment or can't make an adjustment.
This is an example of a behavior that is annoying my partner. I'm embarrassed by it, quite frankly. I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? Not to mention I had to go out and buy more forks, which sucks. So, so yes, it's something that I think it's a behavior, it's an irritant that I'm going to try to fix.
Yeah. And that ideally, that's the hope, that if you were to come to your partner and say, hey, this thing is irritating me, do you think you could try and work on it? That your partner would say, yes, I will try and work on it. If you're in a situation where your partner fights back and is like, no, get over it, I think that's indicative of maybe a bigger issue in the relationship than just these little moments of irritation.
Yeah. I think we saw this listener's question. They're fixed. So you're welcome. We got a second question here. Hi, Kel and Michelle. What does it mean to be in a happy relationship? Because sometimes I wonder if my current marriage truly is happy. What does that look or feel like? That's a heavy question there, right?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind for me is that, what we could go down one of two paths. I think there's a segment of the population where they're not sure if they're happy in their relationship, but deep down they kind of know they aren't. And they just don't want to deal with the consequences of knowing that because it could be difficult. Mm-hmm. And then there's people like probably this listener who like truly doesn't know the answer. And so let's talk about it. Let's figure out how to help.
Yeah. I would wonder how long they've been in this relationship.
Yes. I would want to know a lot of more information, but also, is this person aware of what makes them happy outside of the relationship, just as a person or in friendships or at work? Do they experience happiness in a certain way there, but in this relationship, they don't have that same feeling. And so they're questioning it.
And are they having unhappy experiences? Meaning, is there conflict? Is there this underlying, drama going on behind the scenes? Is there kids that are driving them crazy? I don't know.
Yeah, stressors, of course.
Stressors.
Yeah,
Are there stressors?
Yeah. Financial, housing, all that stuff.
I think everybody aspires to have a happy relationship with their spouse or with their partner. So are they equally invested in the relationship? Meaning, are they both giving 100%, or is one person a little less? Do you see that in your practice?
Yeah, I think there's a fallacy there, though. Like there's an expectation that both people either have to equally contribute or always kind of be giving 100 to the relationship. That's just not realistic always. It's just, there's a balance. It's constantly changing. Who's giving more? As long as there's a balance, I should say, where both people are feeling like they're contributing, that the other person's making an effort, and that the health and happiness of the relationship are important to the other person.
Yeah.
But can we back up? Because I'm going to say this. Yep. We got to define happy, because I don't know. I also don't know what that feeling is to that person in the context of their relationship. So is happy in a relationship to this person contentment or serenity? Is it excitement and butterflies? How some people are like, it's got to be exciting or passionate. I have to feel excited, or the love is dead, like either or. There's some people out there who feel that way. But then a lot of people, and I think you and I fall more into this category, and especially people who, as they get older and their priorities shift, they feel happier in a relationship that has stability, predictability, a feeling of peace, friendship. That feels more fulfilling to certain people than the excitement and, roller coaster to other people. First, we got to define what is happy.
Isn't that a song by Pharrell?
Isn't it like, if you're happy, clap your hands or something?
There's that too, but there's that song. There was that song a couple years ago. Happy.
Yeah, it's huge.
Happy. Happy. Yeah, exactly. It was great. It was for some movie. I think it was
for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Isn't it true though? And I agree with your points there, but isn't it true that you can't always count on your partner for happiness? You got to find happiness from other parts of your life, right? Ultimately, you can't rely on your partner for your happiness. Is that safe to assume?
Correct. Also, and this will make some people roll their eyes, and that's okay. I just want to remind you, happiness is a feeling like any other feeling, which means it's going to be temporary, and you're not always going to feel it, because you can't do that with any feeling. When you're talking about the feeling you want to have in a relationship, yes, happy moments, joy, those feelings are important in a relationship. But what you're really looking for is fulfillment, satisfaction, contentment, because those are states of being. And so if you feel that more than you don't in your relationship, that could be an indicator. If you have more positive feelings about the relationship than hard feelings. But to me, it's more about this person figuring out, are they satisfied in enough areas or categories in the relationship? Like their emotional satisfaction, their sexual satisfaction, and I should say intimacy and sex, the time they spend together, the roles each of them take in the relationship. If those things are feeling satisfying, then generally you would think that the person is happy in their relationship. And if they're not, why not? What need isn't getting met? What isn't happening in the relationship that is barrier to that contentment or happiness?
And if they show each other gratitude, I would imagine that's another important part of a happy marriage or happy relationship.
And then, which the opposite of feeling grateful is taking them for granted, which you see a lot in relationships that are in distress, where someone is feeling taken for granted or underappreciated or unappreciated. But that also, that helps us figure out for this listener some questions they can ask. How would this person feel about not being in a relationship with the other person? And if certain feelings start coming up, like, oh, if I wasn't with this person, maybe I'd feel relieved or free or happier. I mean, that starts to give you some indication that maybe you're not happy in your relationship.
Remember the actor Jack Wagner?
Yeah.
He was on, he was on Melrose Place years ago.
Yeah, I just married to Heather Locklear.
Yeah, or I think they were engaged.
A couple times. I think they were married a couple times.
I just read he got married. and they decided to keep their houses individually. The point of the article was that this works for the both of them. Like this is where they're they built these separate lives. They want to keep that, but they would probably be happiest if they were to have some sort of balance in their life. Maybe that's the right word. I don't know. But then the article then went on to talk about how like other people have also chosen to sleep separately from their spouses in separate beds, in separate rooms, because it just creates a better relationship, or whatever that looks. I mean, they get better sleep, or they balance some of their individual needs with their relationship needs.
I fully support that arrangement as long as both people are on board, and as long as they have plenty of other ways that they are intimate and they connect. You can't take that away if that's the only time that they're, touching or together. But if during the day they have other moments, then I think it requires a lot of honesty from both folks to say, like, yes, this is actually something I want. Because if it's something that one person isn't really on board with, that's going to be an issue.
I try to imagine myself in that position, and I can't. I can't imagine a world where I don't sleep with my spouse, because I love that intimacy, it's the closeness, warmth. And again, maybe they're not doing it all the time. I don't know. For me, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah. One thing that we've always done that I instituted, because it's super important to me, is having separate blankets. But that's as far as I would go.
Interesting.
It's a game changer. Can you imagine not having to like worry about someone else being covered, and you can just have your blanket however you want it to be for the whole night?
So basically you have your own little cocoon kind of thing, both of you?
Yeah, sort of. But I also have to sleep with my limbs out. So
Oh, got it.
my worst nightmare is like hotel beds that tuck you into a tomb.
We should do a episode about sleeping arrangements.
Yeah.
That's such a fascinating. No one talks about it, but it's very fascinating.
When you think of what sleep deprivation does to your life. So if you aren't getting quality sleep, this is a whole other show, obviously, but you're more irritated, you're less patient, you're less emotionally available. Like, a lot of sleep deprivation mimics, alcohol intoxication. It's crazy. Your physical health obviously is highly impacted, your mental health.
So happiness. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, what is a
how do you know?
relationship?
Yeah. How do you know if you're happy? So a couple of things I can do. One big question is like, do you enjoy the other person's company? Or when you think about hanging out with them, like, do you start to feel tense or kind of irritated at the idea of hanging out with them? Because that's a huge indicator. And then I think what might be helpful is if this listener asks some top 5 questions to themselves.
Top 5 questions to themselves.
So top 5 questions are like, name the top 5 people that you respect. Name the top 5 people that you like hanging out with. Name the top 5 people that you would call in case of emergency. And actually list those and see if your partner makes the lists. And I know it seems weird, but it's like, yeah, when I think when my brain is just like on autopilot and I think, who are the top 5 people I respect in the world? And if my partner isn't one of them, okay. If I wouldn't call them in a case of emergency, if I wouldn't, reach out to hang out with them, at least as in the 5th position, they don't have to be number 1, but if they don't even make the list.
What if they're a 6, like a 6? That's
Ooh.
You're on a cusp.
Yeah. I mean, this is the person you are, tying yourself to in a relationship. So they should be top 5 in some of these key categories.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So a lot of questions for this listener to ask themselves that might get them closer to the answer.
From my personal experience, just, what makes me happy? What is a happy relationship to me? What does it look like? We're a team. We certainly know how to nurture our individuality, but we also face adversity as a team. It feels like we're in it together, and ultimately that's a very content feeling and a very happy feling, right? Maybe it's the same thing.
A true partnership where you have each other's backs, you problem solve together, you're a team.
I think it's one way of looking at happiness.
And also, do I feel like my life is better with this person in it or not? And you can use that barometer for romantic relationships or friendships or even family relationships. because I'm not an advocate for continuing a family relationship that is toxic or that makes your life worse. So just, I don't think blood is thicker than water applies for the most part. The idea of like, maybe I'm not happy all the time, which again, you're not going to be because happiness is a feeling. But more often than not, I feel some sense of my life being better with this person in it.
Love it.
These were great questions.
Again, we appreciate people reaching out to us. This is why we do what we do. And this is really the best part of the job. So certainly keep them coming.
And if you can, listen back or listen twice or do whatever you have to as a listener to come up with at least one, if not two, action steps you can take if you can relate to these questions. So we talked about things that you can do if you're in a similar situation and it's causing you distress. I'm a big believer in like, what is at least one action step? And a lot of that is having a conversation with yourself and asking yourself questions and making decisions based on the answers to those questions, and then finding a way to move forward based on all that information that you just kind of reflected on.
If you're struggling with family, friends, or coworkers, in a bad relationship and wondering what to do, or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success, then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating. To be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook.